Hello, welcome to Talking Threadheads. This is a podcast from Chris Joseph and myself, Nicole Snyder. This is season 2. It is the finale episode of season 2. The long journey it has been. Which episode number is it, Chris?
This is the 17th episode of season 2, so the 26th episode overall.
Wow. This has turned into a problem, Chris.
I think we need to ask for a raise next season.
Definitely. Wait, you're getting paid?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that. We are a podcast. You can find us on all of the podcast platforms. You can also find us on YouTube, where we post the video of every episode, where you can see our beautiful faces and see our guests. And we are not affiliated with the Threadhead Cultural Foundation. We're just really big fans of theirs. So please go to their website, check out thcfnola.org, see what they're up to these days. It's right before Jazz Fest, so that means they're up to a whole lot, and they have all sorts of ways you can support the foundation. So I'm excited today because we, in our finale chapter of season 2, we are joined by Rachel Lyons, who is an archivist with the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation. Welcome to Talking Threadheads, Rachel.
Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for joining us. Let's just jump right in. I'm guessing some people, maybe many people, don't know that the Jazz and Heritage Foundation has an archives. So just tell us about it. Start from macro, go to micro.
Sure. So the archive started, I would say, in principle in 1989, which was the first year that Allison Minor, who was one of the festival founders, started recording the Allison Minor Music Heritage stage. So that stage started in 88, and then she started recording it in 89. Both she and Quint had worked in the late 60s at the Hogan Jazz Archive. And the core of that collection is a group of oral histories. So Allison decided, and of course, 89 was the 20th festival. So people are about that time are beginning to look back, like, where's our history? What have we been doing? So she launched this initiative to start the music heritage stage. So that's really what I consider the founding of it. And then over the next 5 years or so, going into the 25th festival, Allison began collecting more and more, knowing that there was going to be a bigger celebration for the 25th. Excuse me. So that was the start of the archive. That collection is now about 1,000 interviews that we have here. Predominantly they're audio, but some we started videotaping in 2009. So we have 1,000 of those interviews. As you can see, I'm in the collections room. We have a very small building in the French Quarter. So I have 2 people out in the main research room, and I thought it was best to come into the collections area for the interview. It's the heart of the festival right here.
Indeed. So how long have you been with the archive?
I actually started in July of 2000. Allison passed away in 1995, and the archive sort of sat fallow for a while. You know, the festival was still programming Music Heritage Stage, and that was still being recorded. They had also started the African folk and food heritage stages, and all those were being recorded. So they were all sort of being recorded and kind of put here. And the building was donated to the foundation after Allison, passed away early. So we had a building that had a bunch of stuff in it for quite a few years until they finally made the initiative and going ahead and hiring somebody, and it was me.
How did you end up coming to the archive?
You know, my background was more in cultural history. So I actually come to archiving as a practitioner. When I was in school, I always thought that I was going to be more of a curator, and archives never really appealed to me because I'm a very social person. um, but I've been able to, strike a balance between the two. So I did do some work in archives and museums and taking a look and understanding what was happening there and how they functioned. So when you start, I mean, this was a completely bootstrap situation. So luckily I had those skills. So I literally walked into an unrenovated building in the French Quarter with a pile of boxes in the middle of the room. So I had to get a folding table and I had to buy a computer. And so I've basically built everything up, from whether it's the virtual presence to the physical things here.
That's incredible. What a great opportunity.
It's not often that archivists
No.
can get a chance to do that.
No, not at all. So when you joined the archive, well, not join the archive, became responsible for the archive, right? I'm just curious, as a professional who works in a career that's adjacent to archives in some way. We're in the same family tree, right?
Right.
Were you able to use the resources from, say, the archive community and cultural community to kind of get the archive and collection up to speed?
So yes, there's a few organizations. There's actually a group of us in town called the Greater New Orleans Archivists. And that was always just an affiliation group where we would get together, 3 or 4 times a year, and each location would have a chance to host. So you could kind of see other people's storage. There's also a bit of a brain trust. So if I needed help with something, I would call upon other people. It was through them that I really became aware that you really need to write policies. So borrowing other people's policies, figuring out what works for this organization, just the whole management, because, it's best to work on a solid footprint than to try to make a footprint from scratch. It's never going to look as good. So yeah, so there's a group, and we still meet, we're still existing, and we've expanded to now there's a New Orleans Preservation Coalition. So it's an emergency response affiliation group. So we all get together and, we're here to help. So for instance, after Ida, when the Backstreet Museum, got hit, some of us were able to go over there and just help them with moving those materials out, when they lost their roof, and offering, technical support as well.
So how does the public access the archives?
So we are open by appointment. I prefer for people to call me first, because not only do we have this room, but we also have collections in 3 other states. So we have materials sort of everywhere. So we have to make sure that what they're needing is going to be here and that we have it. Also, a lot of people will call me thinking, we have old jazz and things like that. So to call me first to make sure. Our website, the archive website, we do have an online catalog where a good amount of materials are cataloged in there. We do have a lot of materials that are not in there, but they can still be accessible, from using finding aids. And then also on the archive website, we developed something over years. It's called the Jazz Fest database. There's 25,000 records in there of everybody who's ever performed at Jazz Fest, including our canceled Jazz Fest. So now that we've added our canceled bookings into the database, it's all there.
Did I hear you correctly that there are archives in 3 different states?
Yes, we have, well, Louisiana, of course. In Los Angeles, we have a collection by a film producer named Michael Murphy. He's a New Orleans guy, but was living in California at a period of time. And he filmed the Jazz Fest every year from 1989 to 2009. And all of his materials are in 2 storage units in Los Angeles. That's one of the collections that they haven't all been digitized. So that's one of the ones we have to kind of dip in and dip out of to make sure that we have those materials. And then in Tennessee and in our Mountain Vault, we have a bunch of early WWOZ recordings. So we are the repository, of course, for WWOZ as well.
And so can people access, say, the stuff here in Los Angeles?
You know, what we do is if, like, for instance, somebody's doing a documentary and, you know, this is our big one. So we find what it is that they want, and then we have to send somebody in to go pull the tapes and go get them digitized and then, you know, send the files over.
Got it.
But, you know, the big issue with the archive is in terms of, like, in this world of YouTube and Spotify and all that. So there's a lot of copyright restrictions to what we can, as they would say, call publish. So we are restricted from making materials just playable in our online catalog. And part of it too is just, you know, if we were to try to delve deep and get permissions for everything, you know, it could take us decades.
That would be a seriously heavy lift, I think.
Yeah, it would be, and it would require a lot of legal fees.
This conversation is a real intersection of my interests, by the way, if you'll indulge me for a minute, because folks who are listening might not know that I went to library school. So I have a background in librarianship, and I work in intellectual property these days. So this is like, Nicole is really, really into this conversation.
Right.
And yeah, and when I was a student, I remember like having an assignment where I went to a local cultural archive here in Philadelphia, and I had never been exposed to a cultural archive before. So I was kind of clueless about like this is neat, right? You might go there and just kind of, learn by accessing materials, right? And I remember what kind of blew my mind and what was really interesting to me was what you were just touching at, like cultural archives are a source for, source material for things like documentaries, journalists, researchers around the world. And I have a friend who works at a cultural archive in Philadelphia, these days. And I love seeing what he unearths through researchers' questions. So like, right? There's like boxes of materials and you have a clue that there might be film from something you're very interested in that box. And he gets to be the one who dusts it off and sees what's in there. So do you have any cool experiences like that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna make one other little parenthetical since you're talking about cultural archives. One of the more complex aspects of my job is a lot of times I'm at the intersection between entertainment and culture.
Right.
So there's an entertainment value, which generally has a higher dollar sign on it than a cultural value. Cultural values are much more, edifying in a personal or social realm, and an entertainment aspect is definitely, on that side of commodifying what culture is. So I just want to say that because that's the intersection I often find myself having to puzzle through with different situations. But I do have an actual really cool example of this to answer your question. We've had a researcher in who actually is a professor up in Boston, and her specialty is African art. And she came to the archive because she started seeing some of the archive's social posts. I don't know if you've been checking them out, but the foundation, we're making social posts using the archives, and the foundation posts them monthly. So she found us that way, just stumbled across this and was like, oh, the archive. So she was looking at Mardi Gras Indian suits and looking at them as artwork. And a lot of what you see from the early festivals is black and white photography. Like from 70 and 71, it's like virtually impossible to find this stuff in color. And she was here doing research for 3 weeks. And we got a call about a collection that was from an older gentleman who's passed away, and he lived around the corner on Domain Street in the French Quarter. So we went over there and we found 3 carousels of color slides from 1970, 71, and 73. I was like, oh my God. So we were flipping, I immediately sat down and just, did a quick check on all of them. And I mean, and these are like so well, normally you see pictures and they're blurry or they're messed up. This guy knew what he was doing. There was some mint color photography of the Mardi Gras Indian suits. And I was like, oh my God, like you have to come and see this. So she immediately said, can you get the picture, can you get them digitized so I can see them blown up? And I said, sure. So that was like an immediate thing that just happened last week.
That's so exciting and cool.
Yeah. And, the family was so sweet, because they were just like, he loved jazz, he was hung out with Preservation Hall. He was, somehow a wealthy man who inherited a lot of money and wanted to live in the French Quarter. And that's what he did way back when. So he had like tons of also like Preservation Hall material and just old jazz stuff. It was really brilliant. But we also got some film too. So
yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for people who might not be familiar, who are your typical users, and what materials get used most often?
Right now, just with the nature of our society and media, everybody wants video. Not so many people want audio. We collect, like I really expanded the collection. So we collect artwork, we collect signage and decor. So we have a lot of really big oversized items. I joke that we have the history of the beer koozie because we have the very first one, which was, the hard styrofoam, and it had like the plastic around it. So we have early beer koozies. So we're really 1970 forward for the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, which includes, of course, the festival, all the other activities that the foundation runs. So our concerts, our festivals, our grants program, just anything that the foundation does, we're the repository for that, as well as for WWOZ. Oh, and I should, of course, say the Heritage School of Music as well, because that's one of our larger programs.
Very cool.
Maybe I missed it. If someone is making a movie, can they license clips from the foundation?
Yep, we certainly do.
And they pay
Definitely.
for that?
So the way that we have our system set up right now is that we want to support those people making movies. So we will work to get the footage out the door, and with a limited license that will let them go to the festival circuit and, start. But if it's going to get picked up in a larger distribution deal, then they have to come back and get another license from us. But for now, we're trying to support that community as much as we can. also knowing that the Jazz and Heritage Foundation gives out money to support these documentaries. So that's an important aspect to really keep things thriving that way. And of course, you know, speaking of movies, so the archive worked with WYES and Michael Murphy this past year to make a documentary on Irma Thomas that was picked up by American Public Television by 270 stations around the country. So that was being broadcast. Also, the large film that was done by Kennedy Marshall about the 50th festival, that's being released, and that has a lot of our materials in that movie as well. So you can see a lot of our archival clips and archival information in there. It's called, I should plug it, Jazz Fest, a New Orleans story. It's opening in Los Angeles and in New York on May 13th.
We will put links to both the Irma movie and to the upcoming movie in the show notes.
Okay, thanks. And of course, our Smithsonian Folkways box set.
Yes.
Yes,
the next question.
which we're about to talk about. So I think that came out in 2019, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
A beautiful box set, both book and I think 5 CDs of songs from decades of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Are there any more plans to release compilations like that?
Well, now that I've done one, I know what I'm doing. I could easily do another one. I would love to. The archive works best with media partners. So yeah, if somebody out there wants to come on and make a proposal with us, we would love to talk to you.
And so to that point, you were obviously very involved in the Jazz Festing in Place series.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Dave Ankers, who's the director of content at WWOZ, he couldn't be, I mean, we had a great working relationship prior to the pandemic. And he couldn't be more generous. He said to me, you know, like, I didn't think that he would make me a producer, but he did. And he said, Rachel, I couldn't have done this if you hadn't already been here for 20 years organizing everything. So I guess it was after Mardi Gras, like right after Mardi Gras, when things were getting really hot in Italy with COVID, he called me and he said, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And I said, yes, I am thinking that there might not be a festival. And he said, well, we're not talking about that right now. So once it was, I mean, we started discussing it and ideas started flowing. He was, of course, a producer on the Smithsonian box set, which gave him the deep dive in terms of the content and the diversity of where we could find content. So that Smithsonian box set was the first flight of stairs to then get to the top of the tower to do the first one. And that was just enormously successful. I was so happy. A lot of it, because that one was super fast, we didn't have advance notice in order to digitize materials like in Los Angeles. So we had to deal with what was already digital in the archive. So we just started pulling. Dave actually listens to every single set. Like he would email me at 3 a.m. and I'd get another email at 6 a.m. Like he just did a deep dive and completely curated every minute of what you heard. So when the second one rolled around, we had more notice and we were able to really go into the Murphy archive and the inventory and go through those materials and make targeted requests. And of course, Michael Murphy and Celista Eberly, they were helping us because they know their collection inside and out as the content creators. So they were fabulous as well, really working to help us. And then, of course, by the time we did the third one, some of it was a greatest hits along the way. And then, of course, you know, the Wolfgang stuff. I finally was able to track down those 70 recordings. They showed up on Wolfgang's. So yeah, it was all moving along. Actually, Joe made, and I can send you this link too, if you want to include it, but Joe made a social post about how we make jazz festing in place. So there's a cute little video that the archive did. We'll send you that link as well.
Please do. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would love to check that out. And I mean, I remember listening to all three, right? And like chatting with my Jazz Fest friends and just being like, this is great. I would like to be able to do this more often, just not in the context of a canceled Jazz Fest, right?
Right.
You
I
actually,
mean, hundreds of thousands. We
Yeah.
have just thousands and thousands of hours of audio and video.
I like would love there to be more opportunities to engage with that that material.
you actually, Rachel, gave me an idea. I know Celista very well. I don't know Mike. I've never met Mike, but I do know her. Maybe we can get them on the show one day.
Well, you know, Michael's history with the festival is huge. Because any project that he did, he came up with some kind of sponsorship for it all along. So he actually brought in like the Acura sponsorship, you know, which lasted for 20 years. He brought in Microsoft and all of these sponsors, you know, not just underwrote his production, but, you know, he brought Jazz Fest to Japan in 1989. Like he really made Jazz Fest global. And his passion and love for the city of New Orleans is huge. But Michael, there's no underestimating how much Michael Murphy contributed, you know, to the financial well-being even of the foundation vis-a-vis the, you know, through sponsoring of the festival. I mean, it's just gigantic, his contributions.
That's great. Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
that's great. Chris, get on that. So tell us what projects are on your plate. What can we expect next from the foundation archive?
Oh, Lord. So currently, we are working with a news channel that wants to put something on the air a week from Thursday. So we have that going on. We're, you know, a lot of what we're doing is, so we transitioned the archive about 2 years ago. Our associate archivist, Dolores, she decided to move along. She didn't want to work full-time anymore, but she works for us part-time, which is brilliant. So we reimagined her position into this digital archivist position, which is Joe Stolaric. And we started doing a similar bootstrapping of building a digital archive. So the foundation is 12 people that work full-time year-round. We do not have internal IT department amongst our 12 people. So what we're doing is really pretty progressive for an organization our size. So Joe's been bootstrapping the digital archive, and we're working in the next year to open the pipeline to get a seamless movement of materials from WWOZ here in the archive. And then of course the Wien Center over by our main office, which is our music school. And it also has a 200-seat auditorium in it. And they can record from any room in that building. So that's 10,000 square feet. And, we have a room for trumpets. We have a room full of drum sets. We have a baby grand piano. So all of what's being recorded over there. So that's our really big lift for this next year, is really getting, Joe's built the foundation for the digital archive. And now we're building large connection pipelines to two basic media centers, which is one of the reasons why the foundation really decided to invest in doing this work. It's just been huge.
So it sounds like the archive is only going to continue to just grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and, we have a radio station that has a video division. So, and video is very big files. Mm-hmm. So we really need this in order to make sure that, the culture persists.
Right on.
So here's your bonus round question. Do you get to enjoy Jazz Fest?
Oh, yeah, that's the last question. I love my job. And I love the festival. So I'm at the festival all day, every day. I usually go in early because it's great to be there when it's empty. Mm-hmm. I also do a lot of preliminary shopping because we do purchase artwork at the festival. Oh, cool. I'm also looking a lot at the decor and seeing items that would work for the archive. We can't archive everything. So yeah, I do enjoy it. And I love the fact that we do the material culture of the festival. Mm-hmm. So I'm there all day, every day. Even if I'm enjoying myself, I'm learning something. Mm-hmm. I see things. I mean, I've discovered like shirts I've never seen before. I'm like, behind some guy and I'm taking a picture of the pattern on his shirt. Like, wait a minute, I don't think we have that one.
Oh, I love your job. It's like a dream job.
Oh, I'll tell you this story. I can't remember what the show was, but I was at the Lanyap stage. Mm-hmm. And there were all these people sort of down front, but it's weird because they have the little hedges and stuff around. And they're all dancing. I'm standing in the back and I see them passing a water bottle to each other periodically. And nobody's drinking. But they're shaking it. And so I'm like, what is this? So I go walking up and I realize it's somebody's ashes. They are scattering ashes at the festival up front, dancing to this band. So I went up to them and I just started talking to them. I'm like, what is, tell me about this. So I gave them my card and I just said, and they had made buttons, memorial buttons. Mm-hmm. And things. And I will walk up to people at the festival and be like, hey, I like that. Like, oh, can you tell me about that? And then, people love the fact that I'm interested in, the audience and the community participation in the festival and those roles. So yeah, I have a good time at festival, but I'm never not working when I'm there.
Right. I think Chris and I can relate to a little bit of that, like curiosity, because a reason we started the podcast is because we thought we're fans. Like there's musicians' perspectives and the radio station and, all of these people who are more industry, right? People. Mm-hmm. And we're just fans, right? And right. What we find interesting is going to be different, right? Right.
Yeah. Well, the festival, it's always, I say always, but it's just my opinion. But I do consider the audience to be more connoisseurs. Like the diehard Jazz Fest, they're more like connoisseurs of, music, of what their cultural aspects are, what it is they want to do, whether it's the art. It's one of the most competitive art markets in the country to get into Jazz Fest. And I should also say, as just another little shout out, which is the archive has collaborated for many years with 2 cultural anthropologists that study Jazz Fest.
Wow.
So they're actually out there doing a lot of documentation and studying of the groups and the crews and the campsites and many of the aspects of what Louisiana is.
It's so cool. A little peek behind the curtain today, right?
Yeah.
It's been fun to geek out and talk about all this stuff. It really has. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great.
Yeah, sure. And y'all should just let me know when you're here. I'm happy to give you a little tour of our 1,000 square foot Creole cottage here.
Definitely.
So give me a shout when you're here.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Super. Thank y'all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Yep, you too now. Take care.
All right.